Hello, everyone. I'm thankful that you're here tonight to join us as we are on our second job readiness webinar. Last week we had our key speaker, Katie Gathers, talking about how play and leisure skills lead to future employment, independent living, and achieving the good life. So tonight is a part 2 of the job readiness webinar, and in essence, we'll be leveraging your school-age transition planning IEP team, tips to prepare and empower parents and caregivers with need-to-know information. So again, thank you for joining us, and I will get my screen. And of course, it's going to act up, right? I'm sorry about that. It's just not wanting to load up. Well, for the sake of saving time, I'm going to go ahead and use the slides as they are. Just give it one more shot. Okay. On your screen, there are 4 logos. The Center for Disability Empowerment. We have the logo for Charting the LifeCourse. The Ohio Department of Developmental Disabilities, who has offered a grant to create the Ohio Family Network. My name is Deb Peterman, and I'm with the Center for Disability Empowerment. I am a transition coordinator and community connector. I'm also one of 5 agencies leading the Ohio Family Network, serving 17 counties. My next slide, I'm going to go ahead and I'd like to put a poll up here, and if you'll let me know, who you are, that would be great. Are you able to see the poll? I'll give you about 30 more seconds. Okay, we'll end it. And let's see what the results are. So many of you are professionals in the field of disability and just want to learn more about the topics we're talking about. That's great. Many of you are not familiar with Charting the Life course, which is an amazing program that we're going to be using tonight. And let's see. Are you familiar with what happens when your child with a disability reaches the transition age of 14? I would say there's 20% say no, that's why I'm here, good job. Or I'm overwhelmed, absolutely. And most need more time understanding what's going on. That's great. So I'm glad that you're here tonight. So what is the Center for Disability Empowerment? We are a non-residential 501c3 program. We are federally mandated to serve people with disability with 5 core services. The ones that we use as the information referral. We do youth transitions for youth in high school and graduating. We do transitions with housing and helping people to get out of nursing home with advocacy. We do systems and self-advocacy. We have an employment specialist, just not with OOD, and we help people with individual living plans, or independent living plans, sorry. Okay, so our mission is to provide supports and resources for people with disabilities in order for them to be participants and contributors in their communities as they live, work, learn, worship, and play along people who do not have disabilities. So we are person-led. We want people to contact us when they need help, and I'll have my contact information at the end. So I just want to briefly introduce you to Katie, and then I also want to share the Charting the Life course and the one tool that we will do today. So Katie and I met at a Charting the Life course, Ohio, I forget what they call it, showcase. And it was towards the end, and we were just talking, and we were saying there's such a need for us to encourage parents when their kids are younger than 14, when they're diving into that transition situation, and you know the needs that there is to help equip parents to prepare. And so last week, Katie was sharing about play and leisure tools and how important they are to learning and preparing someone with life skills. So Charting the Life, this is the logo for Charting the Life course. It was started with a bunch of parents and people with intellectual and developmental disabilities getting together to see how they can work better planning and how to have a good life. And they worked with the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and they came up with these tools. I'm going to go ahead. One second. I want to see if I can get my slideshow to jump in there. Doesn't want to. Okay, so with the Ohio Family Network, our goal is to help parents get connected with their community, with each other, and just empower them towards a more inclusive community. And the tools are used in a variety of ways. They're all free, and they all belong to whoever's using the tool. So it's wonderful for problem solving. But tonight, I'm going to go ahead and circle the picture here because my slides are not working. I apologize for that. But so we all start with the person and person-centered planning. That's nothing new in Ohio. And, it's all about what that person is all about and where they want to go. And so we also look at them in the context of family and their community. And then when we are helping or working people with people with tools and getting to a direction where they want to be, we're considering 6 of these achieving life outcomes. One is on daily life and employment. We consider social and spirituality. We have safety and security, community living, family living, and advocacy and engagement. This next circle is where we get those kind of resources. So, we call them the 3 buckets. So one bucket is discovery and navigation. One thing about this employment series is we will be talking about, I'm getting old, I think. I can't remember anything. But anyway, we'll be talking about customized employment. And that's part of the discovery and navigation, finding out what interests a person and how to connect them with those areas of interest. Another thing is with connecting and networking. Finding out what other resources there are out there, maybe meeting other families that are interested in the same thing, or helping a person connect with their interest. And then we have goods and services. Goods and services are anything that would help you to reach your goal. And it's part of exploring. What I love about the work series is that it's creative and allows for the input of the person rather than someone from an agency saying, well, this is what you're going to do. None of us like that. And then the integrated star has these different relationships here. And so we consider their personal strengths. And it's always positive. It's not about what someone can't do. It's about what they can do. What are their relationships? Are they connected with their own family and maybe nobody else? Or maybe they're connected at work, or maybe with a teacher or classmate. Those kind of relationships that help support us in a personal way. Some programs are eligibility specific, whether it be low-income housing, SSDI, SSI, maybe counseling. These are things that a person qualifies for. Community-based is anything that all of us should have access to in our community, whether it be the mall or stores, or getting on the bus system, or going to the movies. These are things that all of us should have access to. And when we're thinking of it, when we're talking to a person, we're asking them, what do they feel they have access to in the community? And then technology. Technology could be anything from, an alarm clock, a smartphone, knowing how to do PowerPoints, photography, or maybe they have a voice system. Any of those things are considered technology that would help improve a person's life. And then this arrow is just right here, we're showing the different levels in someone's life. And so they've thought about everything in the system. So for tonight, we're going to be talking about the life trajectory tool. And with that life trajectory tool, the simple question is right here on the right, upper right, is the vision for what I want. And a lot of times people, want to talk about what they think is a good life. Many times people they'll start here, what I don't want. They've never had the opportunity to talk about what they want to do in this life. But most people know what they don't want. So sometimes people will start here, write down what they don't want, and it helps them to see clear what they do want. So this is the whole process. So if a person identifies what he wants, then this area right here is the planning area, which is where Katie will be talking about. What things can we set in place to help your child, your student, get to that transition prepared. So with that, I'm going to share the screen with Katie, and I'm going to stop sharing mine.
All right, and then that's going to let me share my screen. So give me just a moment. All right, hopefully everybody can see my slides. My name is Katie Rathers, and I'm very excited that Deb invited me to participate in her webinar series. I am an occupational therapist, and I've worked in schools for the last 10 years for a company called PSI. And I'm also a parent. I have 2 children. My son is 21 years old, and my daughter is 22. And I'm really excited to just kind of share with you all a little bit about our journey, particularly in the education system, trying to navigate, all the different transitions. We started last week with early childhood. And tonight we're going to be focusing on transition age IEPs or individual education plans, and kind of everything that goes into navigating that system and working on teams with your schools. And the main highlight is that families and the students that are being served in the schools are the most important people at these meetings. And as an occupational therapist, one of my missions is to promote the use of tools for families to use to feel better equipped to participate in their IEP meetings, because as a parent, I know it can be very daunting to sit in an IEP meeting with, a number of education professionals who are speaking a language that I'm not familiar with, and talking about, levels of support and goals that they're putting forth, for my child. And, that it can just be very daunting for parents. Maybe not for everyone, but my experience was I felt, like one person in the room. And over the years, I learned how to, navigate the system and how to, find people to come with me to these meetings. And I became an occupational therapist actually during this time. And I really wanted to work in schools. And so I've gained some knowledge through my years as a school-based OT. And so tonight, I am going to be focusing on this trajectory tool with charting the LifeCourse, because I think it's a really great tool that could be used by families to start conversations at home and conversations with, the educators to, bring some more robust information from the families and the students to put into the IEP documents that are being created. And I'm going to go ahead and just one thing here. Okay, there we go. All right, so the objectives tonight are to help the participants understand, the purpose of a post-secondary transition plan, and the components that go into a transition age IEP. And then to understand what the concepts of student-centered planning are, and some terms like self-efficacy and self-determination. And then secondly, as the transition age IEPs are being developed, and they're developed every year, and they can also be amended throughout the school years. So I just want to help, families and anyone working with students in a school setting understand, the key role that families and students play in developing the school-based transition IEP, and give you some ideas of some other people who might be, coming to the meetings and serving on the team. And then lastly, resources. So just to be able to locate some tools and strategies that families and other stakeholders might use to assist in the development of a transition plan, one that is really truly student focused. And like I said before, charting the LifeCourse trajectory tool will be highlighted here tonight. All right, so I truly believe that, families and students benefit from being supported in understanding the steps to the transition IEP process, because it's a little bit different than what they might be accustomed to in the earlier years of their students, getting school services. And then also, support in preparing and asking, questions. And then 3, becoming familiar with supports that might be outside of the education system, and that you can ask about, ask those things be considered as the team is developing a plan for the student. And so these 3 things I plucked out of a secondary transition training that I went to through the Ohio Department of Education. And there was a module on family engagement, which was so fantastic because I'm doing this webinar with Deb. And it just happened to be one of the primary components of Ohio Department of Education's training for intervention specialists, related service providers, administrators, for transition age IEPs. You'll find that there are lots of supports, legislative supports. So the activities and services that youth with disabilities receive during the transition from school to adulthood. And then, other services and supports that adults might receive for employment, education, and community living. These are all supported by legal mandates. So those are really helpful for all of us. They give us some guidance. So I have links here for several of those. And these are not exhaustive lists. This happens to be the 4 laws that the Ohio Center for Autism and Low Incidence included in their transition planning website. And I thought these ones were really good. So we have the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So whenever a parent comes to an IEP meeting, they're typically given a copy of what the team will call IDEA, and that's the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So if there's any new parents here, this is definitely a document that, looks a little daunting to read, but if you at least just kind of skim through it, and if you have questions, you can ask your school teams for clarification on any of it. There's also the Federal Developmental Disabilities Assistant and Bill of Rights Act, 2000. We have the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act of 2014. And then, of course, the Americans with Disabilities Act. Okay, so getting into the meat of our program tonight. I don't know if anybody is wondering, but what exactly is a transition age IEP? So like, how is that different from an individual education plan, in the early school years? But I'm excited tonight to tell you that it's very much different than all of the other IEPs that you may have been familiarized with prior. So when a student turns age 14, the IEP becomes more formalized, and it's formalized with student-centered planning to address 3 areas for graduation: post-secondary education and training, so what they might want to do when they graduate as far as school or any other job coach training they might need to be able to secure a job after graduation. There's also an area for post-secondary competitive and integrated employment. So education and training would be kind of the equivalent of, do they want to go to college? They want to go to career tech school. And then after that, they're hoping to get a job. And then the third one is post-secondary independent living. So those are the 3 main areas that are something that's new when a student turns transition age, which again is 14. And I want to, just clarify that students have IEPs that might start at any point in a calendar year. I don't have 2 students that have IEPs that start and end on the same date. So the transition age IEP has to include this post-secondary transition section for an IEP that will cover the calendar year where a student will turn 14 at any point during that during that year the IEP covers. So I just want to be clear that the student doesn't have to be 14 years old on the day that the team sits down to, finalize this very important transition age IEP. They just need to be turning 14 sometime within that, 12-month time frame that transition IEP covers. So the transition age IEP is really going to support development of student self-efficacy and self-determination, which we'll kind of get into the definition of that a little bit, a couple of slides down. It's really going to describe the students' hopes and dreams for their future after graduation in those three areas: education and training, employment, and independent living. And then this transition age IEP is really going to put a lot of detail into outlining the services and supports that the school will provide to help the student achieve those post-secondary goals. And, you think, wow, they're only 14 years old. How are they going to know what they want to do when they're, graduated? Most kids start kind of on this journey when they're in 9th grade. You're in high school and things get a little more real. You got to start picking just the right courses and, get on the right career track, all those kind of things. So, students with IEPs a lot of times need a little extra time, actually a lot of extra time. So, I don't know if anyone was here last week, but, we talked about how in the, early years, we are gaining knowledge, birth through age 14, through play and leisure primarily, and what they're doing in school. We're learning about that student and what do they enjoy? What makes them tick? What kind of play activities do they seek out? What kind of play activities do they avoid? So we're kind of in the early years really starting to gather some information about our child or our student or the person we're supporting as far as what their, preferences are. What are their interests? What are their strengths? Where are their needs in the community for that person to, fully participate in play skills? So tonight I'm kind of talking more about those same types of things, but as it relates to, the more formal, let's get down to talking about what this child might like to do when they graduate. So let me advance to the next slide. There we go. So the transition IEP is going to contain a lot of things that might be unfamiliar to parents and maybe even, new educators that maybe didn't work in, middle or high school before. So it's my understanding we have a lot of professionals here tonight, which is amazing. Thank you for coming and being interested in this work. So a transition IEP has added a whole new section, and it's right at the beginning of the IEP. And there's going to be a measurable goal written for those three things. Post-secondary education and training is the first one. There's going to be a measurable goal for that. There's going to be a measurable goal for competitive and integrated employment. And then there's going to be a measurable goal for independent living, if that applies. So, what's a measurable goal? Well, kind of like I said on the last slide, it's whatever the desired outcome is that child or family has for their life after graduation. It's not necessarily what they want to happen, or it's not at all what they want to happen in school. This is a statement of what they're desiring after they graduate. So that's a very important distinction, because the rest of the goals on an IEP that parents are most familiar with are desired goals and outcome measures for what they are doing during this school year. So that's a very big distinction, I guess, in this section. I think it's really helpful for parents to, be familiar with, because I can tell you, I was not. I did not know what all of this meant, and I didn't understand the differences. And I really wasn't understanding the language, if I'm being completely honest. So that's the first thing here, the measurable goal. There's a goal for each one of those outcomes, post-graduated outcomes. The second part is something you'll probably hear a lot, and there are so many acronyms in the world of education, and really in the world of developmental disabilities. So AATA is something you might hear, people saying, and it might take a little time for it to kind of be something that you know what they're talking about, like the back of your hand. But what that means is, for each measurable goal area, there is a statement that includes information that they call the age appropriate transition assessment. That's what AATA stands for. So it's age appropriate transition assessment statement. So that goes right underneath the goal. And so what the heck does that mean? I'm going to, I think, maybe just advance to that slide, and then I'll go back to this one, because I feel like that maybe warrants explanation right now and not have to wait till we get to that slide. So an age appropriate transition assessment is an ongoing process that starts formally when they're, going to be 14, the year of this IEP. It's an ongoing process of collecting data on the students' needs, their preferences, their interests, and their skills. And you're going to hear this other acronym probably often as well. These are known as PINs. And so again, that stands for preferences, interests, needs, and strengths. So the age appropriate transition assessment is helping us gather data on the students' preferences, interests, needs, and strengths, their PINs. And so as you can see, like, charting the LifeCourse tools are a way that families can use to have conversations at home, maybe with their, student over dinner, or, maybe talk with family members about, what do you want to do when you graduate? You thinking about college, kind of the conversations that a lot of families have over the dinner table. You can start kind of jotting down some of those things that you're hearing, your child or your student talking about, jotting those down, and families can use the trajectory as a tool to bring to their meetings and describe to the team from their point of view and the student's point of view what they want. So the AATA, the transition assessment statement, and kind of explaining what the students' PINs are, their preferences, is very, very important. So that, like I said, goes right underneath the goals. You might also just hear this section called the transition assessment, which is why I also highlighted that or put that in bold. There are a lot of other types of assessments that are done in schools. So a transition assessment is definitely different from other types of assessments that your student will undergo while they're in school. What these assessments do is they reference the skills, the requirements that a student will need after graduation, for employment and into adulthood, rather than assessing what they need in school right now, if that makes any sense. It's a strengths-based assessment. It can occur in many different formats. There's actually no specific assessment that has to be used by the school or by families. It's really just information gathering. There are assessments that can be selected from, but there is no, AATA assessment, and this is the only one we have, and this is what we use over and over again to collect this data. But what I love about it is that it's very strengths-based. And, this information is going to talk about the student across a whole bunch of different domains as far as academically, what their daily and personal social communication support needs are. And, it just will help assist the students, the families, the school, and any other agency partners, kind of help them plan for adult life. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to the other slide. There we go. All right. So we're back to looking at what is in this transition section of the IEP. So far we have the measurable annual goal for each of those 3 sections. We have a AATA, or a transition assessment statement, that describes the students' PINs, their preferences, interests, needs, and strengths, that kind of speak to their desired outcome. It speaks to what they've said their measurable goal is. If I want to go to a career tech school, the transition assessment statement is going to describe what those students' preferences are and interests that have led them to kind of say, right now, I think I might want to go to career tech school. So all of these things we're talking about kind of support each other and support that overarching goal or desired outcome after graduation. I'm actually going to stop for a second because personally, I think this section is a little heavy. There's just a lot to it. And I want to ask if anybody has any questions. I see a couple of things in the chat.
Yes, I'm going to tell you, I'm trying to help this one lady with the link, and I'm so afraid I'm going to stop the meeting, but I'm not a techie. But anyway, she was saying, I might be jumping ahead, but wanted to ask while I'm thinking of it, do you have recommendations for more formal versus informal observations / conversations of assessment to help people determine student preferences, skills, strengths, etc. Things like career interest inventories, but geared to kids with disabilities, like career picture inventory or hands-on skills assessment. Wow.
Yeah, well, that's a really, really good question. Thank you for asking that question. There are many tools that can be used off the cuff, because there's so much that goes into education planning. I can't tell you right off the top of my head, but as we get toward the end, I'm going to pull up a couple of links. I'm making a note here to answer that question for you, point you in the direction that you might want to go in. So as an OT, I've worked with a few high school students, middle school and high school students. And one of the tools that I use is called the Canadian Occupational Performance Measure. So that's one I can tell you right off the bat. It's something that I use. It's very simple, and I use it in the school-based setting. And it really kind of helps a student just start thinking about areas of their life that they feel they have strengths, and have areas where they feel like they might need a little extra support to reach their goals. And they actually rate themselves on different measures. And then at the end, we prioritize. It kind of helps us prioritize what things we want to focus on. So we pick like the top 3 things from this Canadian Occupational Performance Measure tool to present to the IEP team, present to the parents, because a student, and I actually feel awful that I didn't say this on the last slide. I need to add this for future webinars. One of the other most important things about this transition IEP is that a student must be invited to attend their IEP meetings when they become transition age. I believe this is the first time in their education that like they're mandated to be invited and have an opportunity to attend and speak for themselves. Now, does that mean that every student can attend or wants to attend or does attend? No, but they need to be formally invited. So my son, for example, has come to meetings, and he's non-speaking, and he is just, I love that he's there and everyone can see him and get to know him by being in our meetings. I think it's really important for him to be there, but he is not able to use like a speech device to answer questions of the team. So my son is not able to like directly sit in the meeting, nor can he sit there for that long. So every child is different. So some kids will be able to come to their own meetings and have a lot to say. Some kids might come and be a little on the shyer side and not have a lot to say, but at least they're there, and they're learning the skills that it takes to come and speak up for themselves. And sometimes that takes takes a little time. But so back to the question that who was that asked? Is that okay?
Jill.
Oh, Jill. Okay. The question that Jill asked: are there more formal and informal career interest inventory assessments that can be used? Yes. And when we get toward the end, I'm pretty good at finding stuff very quickly. So I will do that for you and point you in that direction, if that helps. And I'm going to go ahead and check the chat and see if there were any other questions. Nope. Okay. So if nobody else has any questions, oh, there's another message. Hold on. Aha. So Jill says, Jill says she had 1 to 2 peers attend my kids' IEPs from time to time. Bravo, that is an awesome idea. I've actually never thought of that. That's a really great idea. Thank you for sharing that. It said that the peers had great insight, usually better than the staff. I love that. Because who knows our kids better than their peers and friends, for sure. And from a kid's perspective, she said, my kids also with me help make a little booklet or slideshow to share at their IEPs in high school. This is amazing stuff. I love this. I love this so much, Jill. Thank you so much for sharing that. Those are really awesome ideas. And, if it sounds like Jill has come up with, some sort of template or format that she uses to create a booklet or slideshow to share at the IEP meetings. So for families that, are not really sure, how to put something like that together, this is where like you could go to the Charting the LifeCourse website and download some of the planning tools, and you can, create a slideshow using those. Some of the things that Deb had started showing, like the trajectory, the integrated star, those sorts of things. Or you can just create, like I just did for my son. We are starting a digital portfolio with like video examples that I've taken with my phone of him performing some of the goals and objectives that the school has been working on, so that future employers or independent living, supported living places or job coaches can kind of see what my son can do. So there's like so many, there's a bunch of ways you can skin a cat. So yeah, I love charting the LifeCourse goals. I love that Jill has already like kind of started her own way of doing it, booklet and slideshow. And I love the idea of having peers attend the meetings. That's an awesome idea. We'll get into like who you can invite to your meetings here in a couple slides. Because basically you're entitled to invite whoever you want, which is awesome. And a lot of parents, don't realize that. All right. So I don't see any other questions right now. So I'm going to keep moving through here. Where am I at? So we did measurable annual goal. We did the age appropriate transition assessment statement, the pins. The next thing is in this section for each one of the 3 areas, the school will be putting in what types of courses the student will be participating in at school. So, a lot of times it'll just say, Common Core curriculum or something like that. It could have something else special in there. And again, because IEPs are so individualized, that just kind of indicates what courses they're going to be taking. The next part that's in there is also kind of important. So we need to say like what goals, like the regular IEP goals that we're all familiar with or have been familiar with from the earlier years, which ones of those IEPs goals are going to support this post-secondary transition goal. So you just need to kind of like link this post-secondary transition area to whatever goals are in your student or your child's IEP that are related and support this post-secondary outcome. So that's kind of important too. We want to make sure that like everything is kind of like driving together as a comprehensive document. The next thing is one that I find to be super important, and it's the transition service or activity. So what is the district going to provide to support this post-secondary outcome? And this is a really important area because this is also a little different than how other IEP goals are written. This statement is going to say the intervention specialist will do blah, blah, blah. Instead of like the student will, sort, laundry into 5 categories with, 80% accuracy, 80% of the time, that sort of thing. In this section, we're saying, what is the service provider going to do? So I think this is kind of a really neat part of the transition IEP that I was super unfamiliar with when my son was this age. Because I was always like, isn't everything supposed to say that, the child will do this or the child will do that? But here we are outlining what services and what activities the school or even outside agencies are going to do. So perhaps you have been at some point during the transition years been hooked up with, let me just pick one. How about the Bureau of Vocational Rehab for like some education transition services. So you've been linked up and they are providing some sort of outside agency service to help support the school and support this student in their post-secondary goals. So whatever it is that they're providing can be listed here. So it's not always, just the intervention specialist, or if you have a parapro support, or a speech therapist or an occupational therapist. It's not always just school providers. It can sometimes even be outside service providers. And then for these services and activities, the next thing is you're going to see it's going to ask you for, like, when will this activity begin and when will this activity end? So I'm going to throw out the example of Bureau of Vocational Rehab. So I think, don't quote me on this, but I think it's something like they might have like an 8-hour pre-education transition service kind of thing that they can have someone help teach a student some job readiness skills that they might need in order to start exploring volunteer opportunities when they're in high school, or employment opportunities. So because that's an eligibility, and because it's already defined as an 8-hour program, that would be listed in here. It's going to start, first trimester, whatever that date is, and end. Maybe they're doing it once a week, so 8 weeks later. And then the frequency, once a week, whatever is determined. So there has to be like a beginning and end for each of the services and activities. And then the frequency of those services. And then finally, like, what person or agency is responsible for delivering that specific service or activity. So all these things are just, a lot different than what the rest of the IEP, will look more familiar to families that have had a student with IEPs in the younger years. So all of these things, let's see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So there's 9 things. Each of those 9 things is going to be outlined for all 3 of those areas: the post-secondary education and training, the competitive integrated employment, and independent living, if that applies, if that's an area that needs to be supported. Oops. And I got this off of a resource that families or professionals that maybe aren't in a school district or in a school setting might want to kind of look at. If you go to the Ohio Department of Education website, and I have a link here in this PowerPoint, there's a link for resources for teachers and resources for parents. So there is a link for special ed services, and then what we call the required or optional forms. So if you want to see what an IEP looks like that has the transition section in it, you can see that form, and you can see pretty much any form that goes into special education, just so you feel like you know what's going to be discussed, what areas will be discussed when you head into your IEP meetings.
Katie, can I ask a question real quick?
Sure.
This is a lot of information, and I'm not a parent who's gone through an IEP. Is this information that schools talk about maybe when their kids are in later elementary or middle school? Do they start introducing these concepts in meetings before they get to the transition age? I don't know if that question makes sense.
No, it absolutely makes sense. And it's a very good question. So, all school districts are different, and all school buildings are different, and all school teams are different. And every year we have, there's staff turnover. So there's different people on the teams each year, and all of that. So, there is no answer to that. Is it something that we aspire to do? Yes. And it's probably one of the reasons why I'm here tonight, because Transition age IEPs is an area that's been identified by the state as an area of, need for attention. And one of those areas of need is to kind of pull families in and help them, be included and help them, understand what this process is like, and what to expect. And, how can we support you? How can we help you, participate as much as you can, and offer as much information as you can, into these sections, of this new IEP. So I would say that, I'm just going to speak from my own personal experience. I did not receive a lot of, that I can recall. I did not receive a lot of, heads up that this is coming, or orientation to, any tools or resources that are out there. I did a lot of researching on my own. And I will say that as a parent, that can become really overwhelming. I became super overwhelmed, but I did have a lot of questions to ask the teams. And sometimes they didn't even know about the resource, and that's okay. This is like a team effort. Everyone's kind of learning together because each student is different. Each student's going to have different needs and different desires. And so, yeah, I wish I could say, Deb, oh, there's, at age 12 at the IEP, it's part of the law that we have to, schools have to introduce families to what's coming next. Maybe that should be added. I don't know. But I try to let parents know, and I know that the teams I'm on, we're always seeking to, try to give parents a heads up, answer questions, provide them with, ideas. So charting the life course, since I love it so much and have had the good fortune of meeting Deb Peterman at the Charting the Life Course showcase last May, I was like, I am going to take this to my school districts and I'm going to, share it out with parents. So I got permission from my school districts to share this tool with my parents. And then I've also just kind of started talking about the Charting the Life Course tools with, the intervention specialists that I work with, and talking about it with some of the administrators, just so that they know that this tool exists. And I've kind of pointed out that, Charting the Life Course is, included in the Ohio Department of Education website. You will find links to Charting the Life Course there. You will find links to Charting the Life Course on the Employment First Ohio website. So, and many other places. So I've pointed out to my teams that, Charting the Life Course is something that, may have been a grassroots effort a few years ago, but it's really taken off, and a lot of partnerships have been developed with Department of Education, Bureau of Vocational Rehab, Employment First Ohio. I mean, there's so many partnerships happening, and people are talking about Charting the Life Course. So I think there are a lot of tools out there, but Charting the Life Course is one that, I became familiar with, and gets rave reviews from users. And so it's something that I'm promoting at my schools. It's not the only tool, but it is an awesome tool. And I'm really excited to, share that out with my teams and my families. Does that answer the question, at least somewhat? Since there is no
Yes, thank you.
final answer on that. All right, I'm going to check the chat box again real quick and just make sure there's no other questions. Okay. All right, so let me close the chat box because I think now I'm on the wrong slide. So let's go back. Okay. So, we talked about, some words in there, student-centered planning, and what that means. So self-efficacy, is defined as a person's belief that they can be successful when carrying out tasks. And self-determination is the ability or power to make decisions for yourself. I like to try to throw out some shorter versions of those definitions. So I see self-efficacy as, student-centered planning is helping to build confidence with the students, that they can be successful with whatever their hopes and dreams are going to be after graduation. And then self-determination, personal choice making. So, when kids are coming to their transition meetings, and, like I said, some of them might be a little shy at first, or, not knowing why they're there. There's all these adults and they're all talking about them. This is all kind of a process for students, and they're all going to start at a different place with self-efficacy and self-determination. So regardless of where they're at, as teams, as families and school teams, we really want to help foster self-efficacy and self-determination skills in our students, and student-centered planning in the transition process really helps support that. So I think that's awesome. All right, we already talked about this slide. And I think I already talked about how families can contribute to that age-appropriate transition assessment. All right, so I guess moving more into the nuts and bolts of charting the life course, and like, how can you use the trajectory in the transition planning process as a family when you go to these IEP meetings. Deb did a really great job at the beginning of our presentation, kind of describing, the center of the star is, person-centered. So the person that has, like Jill described, the friends and peers around them, but the person that we're having the meeting about, they're the one, the white one right there in the center. And then they've got all these support people behind them. And, when we're talking about success on graduations from age 14, what do we have? 15, 16, 18, 19, 20. So like some of these kids, we hope a lot of them will graduate when they're 18. Some might need a few more years in high school, and they can receive education up until their age 22. My son's a perfect example of that. He's 21 and he is turning 22 on April 4th of next year, and he is going to school until the day he turns 22 because he needs it. And the team has deemed him eligible to continue on. But so, the students at the center, and they need all of these years to do, this transition planning, which includes what Deb described in the start: daily life and employment, social, safety and security, community living, healthy living, advocacy and engagement. Through this transition IEP, she talked about the buckets. Some of it is discovery and navigation. So discovering what the student is interested in pursuing, and their interests and desires for when they graduate could very well change, and that is actually expected. but through discovery and navigation, what opportunities are they eligible for? What opportunities can we offer them at school to discover and navigate through the journey of what they want to do when they graduate? Connecting and networking. So because we're talking about family engagement, this area of that ring, the 3 buckets, discovery, navigation, goods and services, and then connecting and networking. I find that connecting and networking is like one of the key areas for any IEP meeting, but definitely when we get into the transition age years. It sounds like, I'm going to point back to Jill again, because I just love that whole thing about bringing the peers. So that is a perfect example of connecting and networking. So, her kids were able to invite some peers to come to their IEP meeting. How awesome is that? That is connecting and networking. I'm imagining that, she had to connect and network with the parents to make sure they were okay with that. And then connect and network with, the school staff and administrators to say, hey, these are some good friends. We want them part of our team. Other ways families can connect and network is, having these relationships out in the community. So, parents can reach out to the if there's a parent mentor in their school district, they can have a parent mentor come to their meetings. So that's a way of connecting and networking. You can connect and network with agencies. So I think I had mentioned like Bureau of Vocational Rehab as an example. You can talk with your county board, SSA, which is the, I'm so acronymed out, Service and Support Administrator. If you're connected with someone there, they can, you can connect and network with them. So that area, I think, is really important for families to feel supported and feel like they're really part of the team. Emailing the related service providers. I try really hard to make contact with my families at least every couple months. I try to do it more often if possible. And we send progress reports home every, trimester or quarter. And I just really like to connect with my families. And sometimes they ask me to send them like, a picture of their kid or a small video of their child working with me. What do our therapy sessions look like? So connecting and networking so that everybody kind of like knows what's going on. And that's just a really important area. They're all important. It's just so hard. All these areas are so important, but they all interrelate, which is the cool thing. Let's see. So then you have the goods and services bucket. And then Deb had described the outer ring, which is, the top, the personal strengths and asset of your student or the person you're supporting. That really speaks to the pins, preferences, interests, needs, and strengths. It's like the charting the life course, family tool version of when you go to an IEP meeting and they ask the parent, what do you think your child's, preferences, interests, needs, and strengths are? And then you're like, oh, I don't know. There's so many things and I feel on the spot. If you have a chance to use, a tool like charting the life course, you can, write some of these things down like Jill has done with the booklet that she shares. And then different relationships that you might have, again, with peers, family members, different supports in your community, what things your child is eligible for, eligibility specific. So like in school, we already know they're eligible for an IEP. So there's an eligibility. What else are they eligible for? Maybe they're eligible for, speech and language services. Maybe they're eligible for extra social emotional learning counseling. So there's a lot of different eligibilities. And then there's also eligibilities outside of school. So again, like Bureau of Vocational Rehab was one of the examples they gave you. Also, that one area of independent living, like some students, envision that they'll be, able to live independently when they graduate high school. And, some students and families know that they're going to need at least, some sort of supported living, and, connecting with their county board of DD to see what eligibility specific things are there. But really just utilizing all of the community supports and, paid and unpaid supports that are out there.
Katie, Jill wrote, my daughter's last ETR, I had kids complete a Google survey about her and then compiled that information and shared it at the ETR and added it to the ETR.
That is so cool. Oh, Jill, I wanna connect with you after this, Jill. I love these ideas. They're so amazing, like really seizing technology. You can see technology is on this ring. So, if she's using a Google survey to get like, a peer review of this student to present. I mean, how awesome is that? You're seizing the power of technology, and, and that's what she's describing is something that, as long as you have access to technology, so I'm not gonna say it's free, but hopefully you would have access. That's something that can be done with a little tech savvy. You might need to connect and network with a friend who knows more about IT, or connect and network with someone on your child's IEP team that knows, more about how to create a Google survey. Because props to you, Jill. I don't even know how to make one of those. Anyway, I've learned a lot since the pandemic started, that's for sure. But I was never a real tech savvy person. I was always the OT that was like, we are putting the iPads and tech down, and we're going to use our hands and engage with, objects. And then I learned my lesson when COVID hit. There's technology is here to stay, and I better get on board. So
that's right.
Yeah. But, so this is a perfect example of how, you can use this integrated STAR to figure out what you desire. Jill's saying she desired, and her child, that they have some sort of peer review of, what they think this child's strength, what they think the child's strengths are. So that is such an awesome idea. Some people might need to go look at the STAR and say, okay, well, in order to get there, I need these IT supports, or I need access to a laptop because I don't have one. We all have different lives, so you can't assume that people have certain things. But you can use the Charting the Life Course trajectory tool to really drill down to whatever it is you want to do or create, and what steps you need to get there. And that's what I love about the Charting the Life Course tool.
Katie, I want to just give you a heads up that I have put 3 of the basic tools in the chat. So you guys can look at that while she's talking, but as you can see in the screen right now, you can see that she has one open. So just wanted to let you know.
Sorry, I should have advanced the slide. I got all into that beautiful star with all the colors. But now that I have this slide up, I want to point out that like during this transition period, this life trajectory planning tool, where you have, Deb pointed out on the right, in the purple, vision for what I want. List what you want, what your good life looks like. And then list what you don't want in red, the things that you don't want or that is not going to equate to a good life for you. So I'm going to go real like macro and say, okay, you can use this tool to identify that overarching goal for each of those transition buckets. I can help my student or child write this purple part, a vision for what I want. This is the macro level of what they want for post-secondary education and training at this point in time. We can, and give this to the school. We can also use the same exact sheet to do that for the second area, which is competitive and integrated employment, and then on a macro level for independent living, if that applies. We can also take this tool and use the same tool for every step along the way. After we've done that macro level, I'm going to get real micro, like we just did with Jill's example. Let's say a vision for what I want is to, go to a career tech school. Okay. Jill has said that she has the students, the friends, create a Google survey and include that in the student's profile. How awesome is that? You can put that as a desire, a step over here on the left. Hold on a second here. So moving forward, list current or future life experiences or goals that will continue to support your good life vision. That is something that's going to help support this student's vision by having, it's like a resume. It's like you're saying, this is what my friends and peers think of me. These are the qualities, maybe super funny, maybe is like, a super supportive friend, maybe super honest, all of the things that, the friends would say in this survey. So, you can like brainstorm and be coming up with these awesome ideas like Jill has, and put that on here so that when you go to the meetings, you can say, hey, how about this? Could we try this? Could we try that? And, what help do I need to make that happen? And then you can use this tool, as Deb had pointed out. You can put events that have already happened, your past life experiences that supported this vision, for post-secondary education or independent living or competitive employment. So everything on the top, the left part, past life experiences that were helpful, that have supported you. And then moving forward, what are some ideas to keep that ball rolling? How can we get more of those things that are going to help you achieve, help the student achieve that goal? Now down below, that's where we can write or help the student write things that have happened in the past that push them away from their trajectory. The example of going to a career tech school, what things have happened. Maybe they were made fun of and, they're feeling, not confident. Maybe they don't feel like they have developed enough friendships to be able to go to college, and it's just, too scary because of things that have happened in the past. Anything they're willing to share, and moving forward, so knowing those things, what things do you want to avoid? They're going to keep the student from achieving the good life, the vision for what they want. So this trajectory tool is really cool because you can use it on a macro level to communicate and kind of substantiate the why on the left-hand side for the big goals, the big measurable transition goals. You can also use it to communicate or advocate for yourself, or help your child or your student advocate for themselves on a very micro level for like small questions. So that's one reason why I love this tool so much. I have filled out an example, and I feel like in the interest of time, it's 7:20. I might not read all of this, but this is an example of what one that's filled out might look like. So on the left-hand side, I put the date, I put today's date. And you can see on the right, the vision for what I want. This pretend student wants to go to college or trade school, wants to have a job working with animals and be outside, wants to have their own money to spend on things, wants to have friends, wants to live on a farm like their aunt and uncle, wants to own their own car and an ATV. So I'm not going to go through all the other pieces and parts, but this is an example of what a trajectory page might look like as they're going into maybe one of their first, transition IEP meetings, to just kind of start a discussion with the team from the family or student perspective outside of school, what they've been talking about. And some examples of past life experiences that have kind of led them to make those statements right now. Because again, these things might change, the next time you sit down at a meeting, this whole page could be different. So it's kind of cool to like maybe even just keep a binder or a log of their changing their mind over time and different experiences that have happened. So there is this example in the PowerPoint if you want to take a look at that. So are there any questions right now before I move into, the why all this is so important to post-secondary success? I'm looking here. And I don't see any more questions. I do see what Deb has posted links for the trajectory tools. Thank you for doing that, Deb. I appreciate it. Deb and I have an understanding. I'm not good at presenting and like managing the chat box and posting links and those sorts of things. So she has very kindly supported me in that. So thank you, Deb. All right, so if there aren't any other questions so far, I just want to kind of talk about, what are the things that go into a transition IEP? Deb said these were, and I appreciated her for saying this to me the other day. She's like, an evidence-based predictor of post-school success. She's like, that sounds like you're an OT talking to another OT, and there's might be a lot of parents here. So anyway, what kinds of things have we identified as a nation and as a state, and local efforts to kind of like find out what things can we reliably say are going to support successful outcomes after graduation? So Ohio Employment First has put together a list, which I find really, really helpful, of these evidence-based predictors of post-school success. And so these things reflect the activities, services, and supports, kind of like what we talked about, go into that transition section. They occur throughout the school years. So this isn't like a one-time thing, planning thing. This is an ongoing process. These predictors are things that are associated with more successful outcomes. Again, the things they look at are education and training, competitive integrated employment, and independence, level of independence for living post-graduation. And evidence-based predictors are also essential considerations for the interdisciplinary and interagency team members. So, I'm one of those team members, which is why I'm here, because I didn't know about any of this as a parent. And a lot of my colleagues, we're continually learning. So when when Ohio Employment first put this out, I think these are awesome considerations and really substantiate why it's so important for families and for educators and, community providers, to come together. Because the predictors of success are, number one, that there are collaborative networks developed for student support. Number two, that students, are able to receive individualized career development. It takes a lot of planning to make those things happen. Number three, that, students get authentic community-based work experiences. And that might just be volunteering, walking a neighbor's dog, or it could be, volunteering at a fundraising event with the parents or with some family friends, or it could be an authentic work experience where they're actually making some money. So maybe working at, one of the local pizza shops, or, working at a garden center, or whatever supports their interests, that they're getting some authentic work experiences while they're in school. Number four, a big indicator is that the student has, social and social emotional instruction and skills developing throughout all of the school years, but we're talking about transition age right now. These were important things that I talked about last week, developing through play in the early years, social and social emotional skills. Now we're kind of talking more about those types of skills that they're going to develop, through these work experiences, and will be reflected in Google surveys that our peers might report on us. I just love that idea so much, Jill. Let's see. Number five is that, academic, vocational, occupational education and preparation occurs. And my favorite, and why I'm here tonight, that, parental involvement and parents having high expectations of their students is supported. Supporting parental involvement and high expectations is a predictor of post-secondary success. Number seven, we talked about students having self-determination skills, independent living skills, and that they receive instruction and skill building while they're in school. And number eight, that students experience inclusive practices and inclusive programs. There's still, some struggles that people with disabilities experience, quite a few struggles actually, with inclusive practices and programs. And it's always getting better. I love that the needle is always moving in the right direction. Never fast enough, but as long as it's moving in the right direction, that's a good thing. But our webinar tonight here is, including families and including their voice and including the voice of the student is really the key to an awesome start to the transition years, and continuing that through the transition years with all kinds of awesome fun ideas like Jill is really going to enhance their program. So the collaborative networks, and I pulled this right off of, just to explain them. Research shows that youth benefit from having a support network, and this is both the formal agency-based networks and informal networks. So I kind of plopped the charting the LifeCourse rings here again, because that eligibility category. So some of those are agency-based and eligibility-based. Same thing with technology, can be eligibility based. Like maybe your insurance, the student maybe needs an assistive communication device, and eligibility for technology is, going to come into play. Will insurance help pay for that? What's the family contribution for that? If the family can't afford it, is there like a lending library? Like Ocali has, the Nisonger Center has a lending library of assistive technology so that people can trial things out. So yeah, youth benefit from a support network of, formal and informal supports. The individual career development, kids are forming their individual work identity. And, I'm almost 50 years old, and oops, I just outed myself. This is an ongoing thing and spans the lifetime. So I'm almost 50 and I am still forming my work identity. So that's awesome. I love that. But kids are just starting out on this journey, and the transition IEP is where we're kind of like helping to support them with more formal thought process on developing their work identity. The authentic community-based work experiences, I think I kind of already touched on that, like, volunteer or working. The social and social emotional instruction and skills. So I think a lot of us have really heard a lot about social emotional learning, especially in light of the pandemic. I think that this was something that a lot of educators and therapists in particular, I know definitely OTs are very involved in student mental health initiatives. This is something that has really been highlighted for everyone since the pandemic. Our students and our families, I mean, everyone, we had some periods of isolation and, being cut off from the things socially that we were used to doing. Some of the younger children, that's what they were born into, and they didn't even have these opportunities, in the first few years of life, and now they're thrown into school. So, developing social competencies are so critical to successful participation in adult community life. We all know that. And they're citing here that employers report that an inability to meet the social expectations of the community and workplace remains a top reason why employees, whether they have a disability or not, might lose their job. So, developing these social competencies are so important just to overall health and well-being. I mean, I start with that as an OT, like nothing happens without, emotional health and well-being. But in terms of a transition IEP, we're talking about school and work life and independent living. This is a really important area, and I'm so psyched that there are so many resources out there and most schools are embedding social emotional learning into their curriculum. There's been a lot of state and I don't know, federal funding, I'm not sure, but a lot of state funding to support this initiative, and that's really going to help post-secondary success. That number 5, academic vocational education preparation. So, you know, students with disabilities really need a well-designed, coordinated, and, you know, unique education program. And so I guess that's like the main reason why we have this special, very special transition IEP section added. And why we really want and need the student and the families to participate as much as possible, and be supported to start, you know, participate and grow in this process. And again, my favorite, supporting parental involvement and expectations. So, you know, parents, guardians, and other caretakers, you know, maybe it's grandparents or, you know, support people, babysitters. They are essential to, you know, the student's ongoing success. And parental impact also encompasses the expectations of the family. So I feel like in another slide, I have cited some sort of fact that parents that have higher communicate higher expectations of their children, or communicate higher expectations to their children, disabled or not, the outcomes for those students are greater. As far as getting a job and living independently and getting whatever job training or education that they want. Self-determination, independent living skills. So, you know, a successful adult reflects the ability to, you know, self-manage and direct themselves. You know, we talked about this earlier, self-determination. Self-care and independent living skills are also necessary to function effectively and safely in the community. So, you know, self-care, if we're talking about, you know, going to work, you know, some places will require us to have, you know, good hygiene. You know, they're going to expect us to, you know, have clean hair, teeth are brushed, you know, our clothes are clean, those sorts of things. And, you know, other places of work, if it's construction, like those things aren't quite as, you know, high level of importance. So this is where we kind of like figure out, you know, what are the values of the student and the family, and what kind of career opportunities exist that kind of meet those desires, even for self-care, you know. I love my job because I don't have to wear high heels. I don't have to wear pantyhose. I don't even have to put in any makeup if I don't want to. I don't feel that pressure. And it's not an expectation of my schools that I, you know, look like I'm dressed to the nines. Now, if I worked in New York City at Bloomingdale's or something, that would be a totally different expectation. That would not fit for me. So, you know, just kind of pointing to how each child is going to have an opportunity during these years to express what their preferences are, what they're interested in, even for self-care. And then this last one, the inclusive settings. And I guess this quote doesn't really say anything that I haven't already said. That participation in inclusive settings during the school years provides opportunities to prepare for integration into the adult community. I will say this, I have heard in my years working with parents, and I have felt this myself, you know, sometimes there's some fear. Parents might have some fear with their child, you know, being out there and risking in an inclusive environment, you know, risking being made fun of or risking failing. And those fears can sometimes be a little greater for a parent or a student, of a person with a disability. Because as we all know, those are fears that we all have. It's nothing exclusive to someone with a disability, to have fears of participating, in settings where there's unfamiliar people or, unfamiliar work tasks that we're not sure, or just unfamiliar environments in general. Like there is risks involved in becoming an adult. And so, these are years where we have, this education plan to kind of help the student along in having like the just right challenges to discover and explore what they want for those 3 life areas. So it's just kind of like a safer environment to try some new things, and put yourself out there just the right amount with just the right protections, so that if something doesn't go right, we can, and the child is feeling hurt in an inclusive environment, we can address what aspects of that environment are not meeting that student's need. So inclusive practices and programs, that's really what we aspire with these transition IEPs. Oops. So I'm checking the time. I'm going to go just for a couple more minutes, and then we'll just save some time for questions. Does that sound good, Deb?
Yeah, it does. Let's say 5 minutes.
Okay, that sounds
Okay.
good. So here are just some statistics. Students who have a job upon exiting high school are 5 times more likely to be engaged in employment or education during their first year after graduating from high school. So kids who have had an opportunity, and I don't want to go back to those evidence-based predictors, but one of them was that they have authentic work experiences. So 5 times more likely to be able to, be employed or get more education after graduating. That's pretty significant. So that's like a really big predictor. Number 2, youth who participate in transition programs with 2 or more paid jobs during high school are also more likely to be engaged in post-school employment or education. I think that's a very interesting fact. I'm imagining as an OT, part of that is because of motivation. When you realize that if you are working and you're earning some of your own money, that you don't have to go to mom and dad or grandparents or whoever else to ask for spending money to buy a new video game or something else that you might like. Those are very motivating factors. So this is the evidence that has been gathered out there. 2 or more paid jobs during high school. So that's a really great, I don't know, in my mind for parents, that's like, oh, okay, so that's something we can set as a goal. Try to get 2 or more experiences for my student. And the third one is students who receive services from 3 to 6 community-based agencies are more likely to be engaged in post-school employment or education. So, these kind of community-based agencies are things like, and I'm mentioning some things repetitively just so that doesn't get like lost. There's lots of options, but that Bureau of Vocational Rehab, the pre-education transition services, that's an example that I have said a few times throughout this presentation. That's an example of a service, community-based agency service that would support a student being successful after they graduate to achieve either employment right out of high school or furthering their education. So those are pretty important. So I'm going to wrap this part up just with some tips. Know who must attend your meetings. Here's the list of all the people that have to be there. And like I said before, who must be invited? The parent and guardian always must have been invited. But now the student is on here. So, and I put that little integrated star here, the charting the life course thing, because the parent, guardian, and the student are, the most important voices needed for a student-centered transition plan. And then over to the right, just know that anyone can be invited by the parent to come to the meeting. Jill said that she has a couple peers. Again, awesome. Shout out to Jill. You can have a parent mentor. You can have an outside agency. You can have a friend just come and take notes for you. There's, whoever you want. You have the right to ask for that. So it's very important to know that anyone can come to your meeting that you would like. Find a tool that you like to help guide your conversations. Like I'm suggesting charting the life course. Jill has a really great, tool that she's developed. Do what works for you. Write down your thoughts, prepare a list of questions, and honestly, do not hesitate to ask your questions. Even if you're feeling a little overwhelmed, it's okay to stop the team and be like, okay, I need a minute. I'm not understanding. I know you've explained several times, but I'm still not understanding. Like, ask your questions. You can have a team member or a parent mentor help you do some research. I suggest that as a good tip. You can invite your school teams to meet and collaborate with outside agency providers. I have found a lot of different providers on my own that I have brought to the table for my son's IEP meetings. So I'm the one that invited them. I introduced them. I, started the email chain. And I'm allowed to do that. I'm the parent, and Jack said, yay. He wanted me to do that. My son, Jack. And then, this is probably the biggest thing for me as a tip. If you feel as a parent or the child that more time is needed at a meeting, like if you feel like, there was an hour scheduled for the meeting and, there were some questions brought up and now we're behind and now we're rushing through. I find that happens more often than I wish it did as an occupational therapist in schools. I just want you to know that if you feel more time is needed, you have the right to request a follow-up meeting to reconvene. Does everybody love that? Do they have to have another meeting? No. But if it's needed, ask for it and it shall be, because there is no need to rush. And if you need more time, you shall have more time. Do not feel pressured. And also IEPs are living documents. So maybe you feel rushed and, this document needs to go into effect to stay in compliant and you're willing to sign it, but you might want to put a note on there that, hey, we might need an amendment in like a month or so because I'm not so sure about this part. IEPs are living documents and can be amended upon request at any time, but you need to put your requests always in writing. So here's a list of resources for parents and educators. And I had a couple examples at the end of like what that pre-employment transition service thing looked like. But if you want to look at that on your own when Deb shares this out, I'm going to stop talking now. And you want me to stop my screen share, right, Deb? I'm going to go ahead and do that. There we go. All right, I have stopped screen sharing.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
No,
I'm talking to the wind. So what else is new,
no,
right?
it's okay. I was like, I hope nothing's wrong with the audio. Or I was like, did I freeze out in my internet and I've been talking this whole time? Things like this have happened. in the
No,
past.
I wanted to tell you that Jill put in the chat box
Yes.
the information. Uh, let's see, because we changed. Well, I'm going to go on memory, and then we'll do Q&A. I want to let you know that we will be having some events. The next and last webinar is next Thursday night, same link, and we're going to be talking about customized employment. I love customized employment because the focus is on what a student can do and try to create a position in that way. And then we will be starting a respite series October 26th, and it'll be a three-parter. The first one will be how to use Child and LifeCourse respite tools on how you can share your need for short respite breaks. I think there's people that want to help you, but they just don't know how. The second part of it is we're sharing ideas of what others have done to support families with short-term respite ideas. And then the third one is on community respite. If you want to hear more about those, just go ahead and email me and we can add you to our constant contact list. So that's it. So, but now we should just open it up to anyone who wants to talk. So unmute yourselves and, okay, what is that?
I'm listening to the questions. I just wanted to bring up the answer to Jill's question
Okay.
about the assessments. So I found what I was looking for. Like sometimes I don't know these off the top of my head when I'm asked in the moment, but I knew it was there. So Ohio for age appropriate transition assessments. She was asking like, where can I find, these? So here I put it in the chat box. There's a link to a library, Ohio Age Appropriate Transition Assessment Library. So this hopefully will answer Jill's question for now. There's a lot on here. I've seen it before. I just couldn't remember exactly. I had to re-Google it. But this is a very helpful website to kind of guide you, and anybody else here tonight that wants to find out what these age appropriate transition assessments might look like.
Yeah.
But really, like if you use something like Charting the LifeCourse and you're having these conversations at home, those are informal assessments that you as a family or caregiver contributing or a peer can contribute to this AATA as an informal assessment. But here are some options. Does that help, Jill?
Yes, it definitely does.